Hi, welcome to SBR Sports Picks. I'm Peter Loshak. It's Friday, November 18th, Week 11 in the NFL, and this is the Into the Weekend with Bet DSI show with Brent, the headlines manager at DSI Sportsbook. We do this call every week with him. He generously donates his time and information to tell us about the notable betting action that he's taken each week in NFL and college football as of Friday afternoon. Brent, it's Friday afternoon, and I noticed a big move in favor of Minnesota, right? It opened around Pick'em. Now it's up to 2.5 market wide, so that's a pretty big move. Minnesota, obviously, 4 straight up and ATS losses. Something tells me I have a pretty strong suspicion that was sharp action on Minnesota at Pick'em.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're this deep in the season. It's like people are still trying to figure teams out, it seems, and certainly we are too in terms of where the sharps are going, where the public are going. Minnesota's definitely one of those teams. I mean, you look at Minnesota sitting at 5-4. They've lost 4 in a row, and we had this discussion, week 1 and stuff like that. We were talking about how the sharps like Minnesota in terms of their futures and odds to win the division and stuff like that. And if I told you that Green Bay was 4-5 and Minnesota was 5-4, you'd think, well, I guess that's who's leading the division, right? But I mean, they're tied with Detroit at 5-4, and Detroit is like, I mean, where did that come from? It's like kind of surprising when you look at the standings, and Arizona as well. You figured they would have been way up on those standings, and they're sitting here at 4-1. It's just kind of like, they're both trying to figure out where they are, I guess, and what kind of teams we've got here. And I guess the bettors too. I mean, definitely is a game where we've got sharp action one way, public action the other way, which is kind of a good spot for us. But the definite move that we did take was on Minnesota, where the sharp action came in. Now in store we took action at a pick and also at -1.5 on Minnesota. So I got a couple of sharps involved in this one. Again, Minnesota at a pick and -1.5. Looking at my wager count, it's almost 3-1 call it in favor of Arizona. So I got a lot of public money betting on Arizona, and just when the team's lost 4 in a row, they're kind of the public easily be going, come on, it's tough to get behind them. They've had a lot of injuries. The Vikings have of course, and their offense has kind of slowed down a little bit. But the sharp action definitely on Minnesota. Again, it was a pick and -1.5. We're sitting 2.5 right now. A wager count, as I mentioned, almost 3-1 favoring Arizona. So a definite sharp and public split on this one, Peter.
All right, that's what I suspected, although I'm a little bit surprised here that the public's all over Arizona, but I don't know, maybe that makes me like Minnesota even more. And then the next thing I want to ask about is Dallas. Dallas covered again last week. That makes 8 weeks in a row that Dallas has covered. The line hasn't moved much, though. It's about 7 or 7.5 at plus money market wide. I'm assuming that the public is all over Dallas this week, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, the public is definitely on Dallas. I mean, the line here at least has gone down. We're down to Dallas -7, -115. And again, I mean, Baltimore, they're another one of those teams where, we talked about early in the season where I think they started off like 3-0, but you look at who they played and it was just kind of like, wow, yeah, they're 3-0, but maybe they're not quite that good. Lo and behold, they rattle off 4 straight losses. Like, okay, this is kind of maybe what we expected from Baltimore. Now they've gone on and won two in a row, so they're kind of back in the thick of things as well. Again, it's funny. You look at these divisions. I mean, Cincinnati's 3-5-1. Pittsburgh 4-5. Now you've got Baltimore leading the division at 5-4. Is kind of like, huh? What's happening to these teams? I mean, is nobody better than 500 anymore? But the line movement that I have down in this game was because of a sharp action that I took on Baltimore. They did bet Baltimore plus 7.5, -120. So that was where the line was at that time. Again, we have Dallas -7, -115 right now. No surprise at all that my wager count is almost 3-1 favoring the Cowboys. I actually have a little bit more money on Dallas as well, just because I've got people with oil money, as we used to call it back in the day, Peter. Oil money on the Cowboys there. But again, just public money on the Cowboys, betting them. The only thing I have sharp involved in this game is on Baltimore, and that was plus 7.5, -120. Looking at the total here, we're sitting at 44.5 right now. That line has crept up almost like a full point, but again, it's mostly just public money betting that one up. I don't have any sharps involved on the total at all. Wager count favoring the over almost like 3-1, but that's kind of to be expected.
All right, so list guys on Minnesota and on Baltimore. And the third game I want to ask you about is the Pats off a loss at San Francisco. And based on the line movement, I'm guessing that you're going to tell us that the Sharps took a third side this week with the Niners. I'm assuming that despite the Pats being off a loss, or maybe because they're off a loss, huge public action once again on the Pats. And again, the line took a pretty notable dip from like 13.5 down to about 11 or 11.5. So at least that's got to be indicative of big money on the Niners, if not sharp action, if not bona fide list guys, right?
Yeah, you nailed that one on the head for sure. I mean, the public is just going nuts all over New England, no surprise at all. And the big drop in the line with the public hammering one side and the line dropping still is because of sharp backs the other way. The line where we took the first sharp hit was a plus 13 on San Francisco. So that's one of a very, very sharp guy who grabbed that number. We're sitting down 11.5 right now. New England, my wager count is almost 10-1 when you factor in like parties and teasers and all that kind of stuff. Just straight bets is almost like 5-1, but 10-1 factoring everything into play, which is just a huge count now. You look at New England typical with them. Looks like Gronkowski's not going to make it, which may or may not be a factor. Looks like Chris Hogan's not going to make it as well. They are going from East Coast over to the West Coast, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. But it's still the Niners that they're playing. It's the Niners are one game better than Cleveland, and which means they're 1-8. So it is what it is. I can't fabricate this stuff, and the sharps are on San Fran plus 13. Public's all over New England. No surprise with the public at least, but maybe a little bit surprising that the sharps are on San Francisco.
Yeah, a pretty stark line move. As soon as I saw the move, I was like, oh, man, I know what Brent's going to tell us about this game. All right, so 3 sharp sides we've identified from NFL Week 11 already. What else can you tell us about notable action from NFL Week 11, Brent?
I just want to mention the Pittsburgh-Cleveland game just for the sake of the total right now. I got a couple of different sharps early in the week who hit this number came out quite heavy at 49.5, and I took under money there. I dropped a full point down to 48. Now, yesterday this line was all the way down to 44. Finally took some sharp money over the 44. So I've got, the huge line move there in terms of going from 49.5 all the way down to 44. We're sitting at 45 right now, but if you talk about, the number and the importance of the number, that kind of is a good example right there. 49.5 was sharp, 44 was sharp in terms of the over as well. So just kind of something worth mentioning. Obviously, if that game lands in between those numbers, it's not going to be good for us. But it just kind of like hammering home the point that it's all about the number, and the number is very important.
Yeah.
Another game that we'll talk about the number and the importance of that will be the first sharp play that I have here, which is Tennessee. Tennessee is on the road at the Colts. This is, I guess we'll call it a big game for their division, right? Tennessee sitting at 5-5, Indianapolis at 4-5, and Houston not running away with anything, sitting at 6-3. But Tennessee, they're one of those teams who can look like they can do all right. I mean, their quarterbacks played quite well. Their defense is pretty tight. They've got a decent running game and stuff. So Tennessee was the sharp play here. Tennessee +3 -115. They're on the road at the Colts. Wager count is slightly favors Tennessee, which I think is kind of surprising, but it may be just like people are kind of sour on the Colts. But Indianapolis used to be one of those teams where you just bank on public money on them. That's not the case this week. So I've got kind of a split in terms of where the public is betting, but sharps definitely on Tennessee +3 -115. Buffalo is another play where the sharps came in. Buffalo is at Cincinnati. Cincinnati is now a 2.5-point favorite. They're actually 2.5 -05. So Buffalo is +2.5 -115. The sharp action that came in was on Buffalo. That came +3 -05. So +3 -05 is where the sharp action came in on Buffalo. I took another sharp bet on Buffalo +3 -110 as well. So I have 2 different sharps involved in this game, both on Buffalo. So that's kind of that's quite a strong play there. Down to Miami. Miami is on the road at the LA Rams. Got a lot of public money all over the Dolphins. The wager count there is almost like 4-1 favoring Miami, and I also have sharp action on Miami. Miami -1.5 is where the sharp action came. We're all the way up to 2.5 right now, so Miami -2.5 at the Rams was sharp. And going down to the Sunday night game, Washington at Green Bay. How bad is Green Bay? I don't know. They seem to be what we'll call discombobulated as a team. It seems every week they've got a different story in terms of lacking intensity, lacking adhesiveness, and maybe they're just lacking variety in terms of good offensive plan, and they've had a lot of injuries. But I do have sharp action on this one. Washington, the home favorite. Again, they're -3, dog 20 right now. Sharp action did come on Washington when it was -2.5. So sharp action at -2.5 there. And Monday night, I just want to mention the Monday night game because I got sharp action both ways. The Raiders -6 -05 was sharp, and Houston +6.5 -110 also sharp. So just going down the list, that was Tennessee +3 -115 sharp. We talked about Minnesota at a pick. Buffalo +3 -05. Baltimore plus 7.5, minus 120. Miami minus 1.5, and finally Washington minus 2.5. Those are the official sharp plays, if you call that, Peter.
Awesome information, Brent. Of course, our regular viewers know that Washington was a play that both my partner Mike Brenner and I gave early in the week on the Monday show. And again, whenever there's a two-way sharp action, as there is in the Monday night game, that tells me that usually it's the favorite that's the sharper side. So that tells me that I'm probably going to be leaning towards Oakland based on what Brent has told us. Brent, thanks so much. We'll talk to you again next week for NFL Week 12.
Go to SBRodds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.